Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse, and the co-prophet of the end times. Today I want to discuss one of the most amazing books in the Bible, the Old Testament book of Esther. Up until now, no other Bible scholar has ever understood that Esther prophesies the end times of both the Old and the New Testaments. First, let's review the basic story. King Ahasuerus is a 5th century BC Persian king who holds a 180 days long banquet for the rich and powerful in his kingdom. At the end of this party, he throws an additional 7-day party to which he invites the common people of his city. At the end of this feast, he invites his queen, Vashti, to come with her crown and show her beauty to his assembled guests. Vashti, however, refuses his request because she has a party of her own going on for the women of the city. Now this angers King Ahasuerus, and so he banishes Vashti and replaces her with the beautiful Jewish girl, Esther. Now let's stop right here because this first part of the story is an allegory of the end of the Old Testament. Since the book of Esther is in the category of apocalyptic literature, we need to examine the symbolic meaning before the literal meaning. The king's party, which lasts for 180 days, that is 1/2 of a year, symbolizes the first half of revealed scripture. The 7-day party tacked onto the end of the 180-day banquet symbolizes the relatively short ministry of Jesus at the end of the Old Testament. King Ahasuerus symbolizes God, who invites the common people, in other words the Gentiles, at the appropriate time in history to also receive the good news, which the chosen people, that is the Jews, already possessed. Queen Vashti symbolizes the Jewish hierarchy at the time of Jesus, who rejected their Messiah, and her beauty symbolizes the one true revealed religion, which the Jews alone possessed, but which they did not want to share with the common people, that is, the Gentiles. Vashti's private party, for just women only, shows how the Jews wanted to keep the exclusivity of their religion. Thus, God banishes the Jews from Jerusalem, just like King Ahasuerus banishes Vashti. And Esther symbolizes both Mary and God's new one true revealed religion, Christianity, which will bring the good news of the gospel to the entire world. Incidentally, one sure way to identify apocalyptic literature, like the book of Esther, is the extensive use of symbolic end times numbers. The 4 most important end time numbers are 4, 7, 12, and 28. The reason is because 4 is the last week in a month, 7 is the last day in a week, 12 is the last month in a year, and also the last hour in a day, and 28 is the last day in a lunar month, as well as a multiple of 2 other end times numbers, 4 and 7. In the book of Daniel, for example, the prophet uses the word king 28 times in chapter 6, and in Revelation, St. John describes 28 items that the whore of Babylon, which represents the United States and England, imports into her kingdom. Here in Esther, the author lists 12 items which decorate the king's palace. Also, Esther prepares for 12 months before first going in to see the king. And the 12th month of Adar is mentioned twice. In addition to the 4 12s, there are 4 7s, 7 eunuchs, 7 advisors, 7 maidens, and as I mentioned, the 7-day party. We need to understand that none of this biblical numerology is accidental. Now let's move on to the second part of Esther, which prophesies the end of the New Testament. King Ahasuerus appoints the evil Haman as his prime minister, and he hates all Jews, especially Mordecai, who also happens to be Queen Esther's uncle, although no one, including Haman, is aware of this relationship, or that Esther is Jewish. Mordecai refuses to bend his knee before Prime Minister Haman, and Haman decides to resolve the problem by persuading the king to execute Mordecai, as well as all the Jews in Persia. Of course, the Jews are terrified, and Mordecai begs Queen Esther to intercede with the king on behalf of her people. After asking the Jews to pray and fast for her success, Esther confronts Haman in front of the king, and she turns the tables on Haman and his evil plans. Haman and his 10 sons are hung on the same gallows that he had built to hang Mordecai. Meanwhile, the Jews are allowed to kill all their enemies on the 13th day of Adar, which is extended in the capital city of Susa to the 14th day. And then the Jews celebrate their victory on the 15th day, a victory which is still celebrated to this day as the Feast of Purim. The second part of Esther foretells the end times, and Esther's great struggle with Haman prefigures Mary's victory over the Antichrist. Once again, numerology is an important tool in analyzing this story. Notice that all the action occurs during the month of Adar, the 12th and last month of the year. The 13th day points to the day when the Blessed Mother always appeared to the shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, from May to October in the year 1917, when she announced that several entire nations would be annihilated, and I might add, in the very near future. The day of victory on the 15th of the month indicates that the 15 decades of the Rosary will be our primary weapon in defeating the Antichrist. Even the 50-cubit length of rope used to execute Haman and his 10 sons, who, by the way, symbolize the Antichrist and the 10 world leaders who support him, points to the 50 Hail Marys in a rosary. Please note also the important lesson that we need a leader like Mordecai, who symbolizes the last pope, Peter II, who will intercede with the queen, in this case Mary, who will then intercede with the king, who of course symbolizes her son, Jesus Christ. Please don't listen to the false prophets who say we should not pray to Mary. Remember, prayer is not the same as worship. The one thing I've learned in life is this: if you want to get on anybody's good side, be sure to make friends with his or her mother. And if you want to join the battle against the Antichrist, make sure to pray the rosary every day, all 15 decades, if at all possible. Now that's all the time we have for today. If you would like a list of end-time materials we have available, simply write to the address on your screen.